Have you ever walked into a room, a meeting, a dinner party, an everyday conversation, and the moment you tried to speak in English, everything vanished? You knew exactly what you wanted to say. In your own language, the words were right there, waiting. But the second you reached for them in English, they were gone. Like someone switched off a light inside your head.
Oh, I know that feeling. I know it far too well. It is genuinely one of the worst experiences. You start telling yourself, am I really this bad? Why can't I form a single sentence?
And here is the thing I really want you to sit with. And I mean this. It has absolutely nothing to do with how intelligent you are. Not one bit.
Wait, seriously? So there's an actual reason this happens? It's not just me being hopeless at English?
There is a very specific, very well-documented scientific reason. Today, we're going to talk about two powerful psychological concepts: the affective filter and cognitive overload. By the end of this episode, you'll understand exactly why your brain short-circuits under pressure, and more importantly, what you can actually do about it.
Oh, I already feel relieved. I genuinely thought I was just broken.
You are not broken. You are human. Welcome to the English Conversation Podcast. I'm Sarah.
And I'm Mike. Let's get into it.
What do you think is the most important quality a good leader needs to have?
That's a tough one. I've never thought about it quite like that, actually. What I'm trying to say is, leadership is really about trust. From my perspective, without trust, nothing else holds together.
Did you notice what happened there? Mike bought himself at least 8 seconds. He used 3 stalling phrases naturally. His answer was clear and thoughtful, and most importantly, he didn't apologize for pausing. He didn't say, "Sorry, my English is bad." He moved through the pause with ownership.
It felt completely different. Instead of panicking during the silence, I was using the silence. It was mine.
That's ownership. You claimed the pause instead of being afraid of it. And naming the difficulty out loud, saying, "That's a tough one," actually reduces the amygdala's response. You're calming your own brain by acknowledging the challenge.
So it's not just a language trick. It's a brain regulation technique.
Language and psychology are deeply connected, which is why it works. All right, one final test. Pressure test number 3. Same rules as before, but this time, before you answer, use at least one stalling phrase. It doesn't matter how long your answer is. What matters is that you stay in the conversation instead of freezing. Here's the question. If you could change one thing about the way English is taught in schools, what would it be? Stop. Did the stalling phrase change the feeling of that pause?
Let me think about that for a second. And I'm not exaggerating, it genuinely reduced the panic because the silence wasn't empty anymore. I was filling it with something intentional.
Intentional. That's the key word. When silence is unintentional, when you freeze, it feels out of control. But when you choose to pause, when you use a phrase to own that pause, the emotional experience shifts entirely. The affective filter drops, the cognitive load redistributes, and your language centers get the extra half second they need to function.
Half a second sounds so small, but in that moment, it's everything.
Half a second is the difference between a blank and a sentence. And the more you practice these phrases until they become automatic themselves, the less mental effort they require. That freed up mental energy goes directly into building your actual answer. Let's close with the most important message of this episode. We've covered a lot today. The affective filter, cognitive overload, the amygdala highback, the myth that struggle equals low intelligence, and 10 stalling phrases you can start using immediately.
And 3 moments of real brain panic.
That was intense.
Good intense, because you felt it in your own body. That's worth more than any explanation. Mike, did you want to share something before we close?
When I was at that dinner party, the one from the beginning, I left early. I told myself I wasn't ready for professional English conversations, and I actually avoided those situations for almost a year afterward.
That avoidance is so common, and it's heartbreaking, because avoidance is the exact opposite of what helps. Every time you avoid the conversation, the amygdala reinforces its belief. English equals danger. Stay away. The fear grows stronger. But every time you go in, even imperfectly, your brain learns the opposite. It learns, I spoke English. I wasn't harmed. Next time will be slightly easier. That is how you lower the affective filter permanently. Not by perfecting your grammar, not by polishing your accent, but by having the conversation anyway.
Imperfect and present is better than perfect and silent.
That should be printed on the wall of every language classroom on the planet. Because here is the final truth. Nobody, I promise you, nobody is listening to you and thinking, they made a grammar mistake. They must not be intelligent. What people actually feel when they hear someone speaking in their second or third language is respect, admiration. Because it's hard. Because most people never even try. I never considered it from the listener's perspective. They're not judging me. They're watching me do something brave. Every sentence you speak in English, even a broken one, is an act of courage. It's a choice to connect with the world beyond your first language. That's not something to be ashamed of. That's something to be deeply proud of. I think I'll go back to that dinner party. Metaphorically speaking.
Go back. Use your stalling phrases. Embrace the imperfection. And next time someone asks what you do, you can say, that's actually a really interesting question. Let me think about that for a second. And then tell them everything.
And this time, I won't leave early.
That's it for today's episode. If this helped you, if it finally explains something you've felt for years but couldn't quite name, please share it with one person who needs to hear it. One friend, one colleague, one classmate who freezes up in English. Because they deserve to know it's not their intelligence, it's their amygdala. And their amygdala can learn. Until next time, stay curious, stay brave, and keep talking, especially when it's hard. See you next time. Before we go further, I want to ask everyone listening something. Just one word. How do you feel when you have to speak English under pressure? Think of that one word and hold it. We'll come back to it. Mike, I know you have a story. You mentioned it before we started recording. I think a lot of people listening will see themselves in it.
Yeah. So, this was about 2 years ago. A professional dinner. Very polished, very international crowd. And I was actually looking forward to it because in written English, emails, messages, I'm fine. But speaking is a completely different matter.
What happened?
I was sitting next to a woman who worked in marketing for a large company. She turned to me and asked, very simply, "What do you do for a living?" And in my head, I had a whole answer ready. I'm an architect. I design sustainable buildings. I care deeply about this work. I had so much to say.
And?
I said, and I remember this exactly. I said, I make building green the nature. That was it. 3 broken fragments. She smiled politely and turned to talk to someone else. And I sat there feeling like the least intelligent person in the entire room. I have 15 years of professional experience, and I sounded like someone who'd never studied English a day in their life.
I want to pause on that for a moment. Because that feeling you're describing, feeling childlike, feeling less intelligent than you actually are, It's extremely common among adult language learners, and it actually has a name. We call it the language ego problem.
Language ego problem? What does that mean exactly?
When we're children, our sense of self isn't tied to how we speak. We make mistakes, we laugh, we try again. But as adults, our identity becomes deeply connected to how we communicate. When we can't express ourselves clearly in a second language, the brain reads this as a threat to who we are. And that triggers what we call a mental block.
That's the perfect word for it. It's like a wall drops between what I know and what I can say.
Exactly. And the higher the stakes, a job interview, a presentation, a dinner party, the higher that wall gets. Because the emotional pressure activates something in the brain that physically shuts down your language centers.
Physically shuts them down?
Almost literally, yes. And that's exactly what we're going to unpack next. The science behind why this happens. Because once you understand the mechanism, the shame around it starts to dissolve. And that, by itself, is enormously powerful.
I really needed to hear this 2 years ago. All right, give me the science.
Okay, so deep inside your brain, there's a small structure called the amygdala. Think of it as your brain's alarm system. Its one job is to detect danger and trigger a response, what we call fight or flight.
Right, like when you see a snake and you either run or you stand your ground.
Exactly. Now, here's the problem. The amygdala is not sophisticated. It cannot tell the difference between a physical threat, a snake, a car speeding toward you, and a social threat, like being judged for your grammar. To the amygdala, they feel identical.
So when I'm at that dinner party, terrified of saying the wrong thing, my brain thinks I'm in actual physical danger?
Your brain treats it like a genuine emergency. And when that alarm fires, something called an amygdala hijack occurs. The emotional part of your brain takes over from the rational language processing part. Blood flow shifts, stress hormones flood your system, and the result is what most people call brain fog.
Brain fog. That's the exact sensation. The words aren't gone exactly. It's more like everything becomes slow and blurry. You're reaching through fog.
Precisely. Now, there's a second concept that makes this even more difficult, developed by a researcher named Stephen Krashen. He called it the affective filter. The idea is this. When you experience negative emotions during language use, anxiety, embarrassment, fear of being judged, your brain constructs a filter. And this filter literally prevents language from being accessed or produced.
So the more nervous I am, the less English I can actually use? Even English I already know?
Correct. Think of it this way. You've been studying English for years. The vocabulary is stored, the grammar is there, but when your affective filter is high, it's like having a fully stocked library with all the lights switched off. You can't find what you need.
That actually explains something that's always confused me. Why can I write a perfect email, but I can't hold a conversation?
Because the emotional pressure is completely different. Writing an email, you have time. You can think, revise, reread. Nobody is watching you. Your affective filter is low. But in a live conversation, especially with people you want to impress, the filter rises immediately.
And then on top of that, there's the cognitive overload piece, right?
Yes, this is the third element. When you speak in your first language, you don't consciously think about grammar or pronunciation or word order. It's all automatic. But in a second language, especially under pressure, you're managing all of those things at once. Word choice, verb tenses, pronunciation, what to say next, whether you sound intelligent, what the other person is thinking. It's like running 5 demanding programs simultaneously on an old computer. Everything slows down.
And then the whole system crashes.
That's cognitive overload. Your working memory, the mental space you use for real-time thinking, gets completely overwhelmed. Fluency collapses. Not because you don't know English, but because you're asking your brain to do too many things at once, under emotional stress.
So my brain isn't broken?
It's overloaded.
Your brain is doing exactly what it was built to do. It's protecting you from what it perceives as danger. The problem isn't your brain. The problem is that your brain hasn't yet learned that a grammar mistake is not a life or death situation.
Well, the worst that can happen is someone hears my accent.
And before we go further, let's test this right now. We're going to give everyone listening a real pressure test so you can feel this brain panic in your own body. All right, pressure test number 1. The rules are simple. I'm going to ask a question. You have 10 seconds to answer out loud in English. No pausing to translate, no writing anything down. Just speak. Ready? Here is your question, and your 10 seconds start now. Describe your job to someone who knows nothing about it in exactly 3 sentences. Stop. How did that feel? Did you freeze? Did you start translating from your first language word by word?
I tried, but immediately I was searching, what is the right word for what I actually do? And then, nothing. Total blank. And I know this topic. I could talk about architecture for an hour in my own language.
And that is exactly the point. Let me tell you what most people experience during those 10 seconds. First, perfectionism. Most of you were trying to build a flawless sentence before you said a single word. You were hunting for the exact vocabulary, the exact grammar structure, and while you were hunting for perfect, the time ran out. That was precisely it. I was waiting for the perfect sentence to arrive. It never did.
Second, translation mode. Instead of thinking in English, most people form the idea in their first language first, then translate. And translation takes time. Under pressure, that time simply doesn't exist.
Think the idea, translate. Wait, what's that word? And the moment is already gone.
And third, self-monitoring. Part of your brain was watching you as you spoke, judging every word. Is this right? Does this sound stupid? What will they think? That self-monitoring creates a feedback loop of anxiety that makes the cognitive load even heavier.
So I was essentially fighting against myself?
Exactly. Now, let's talk about something that surprises a lot of people. Many language learners believe their struggles mean they simply aren't intelligent enough. I want to completely dismantle that idea. Speaking fluency, especially in a second language, is not a measure of intelligence. It is a motor skill.
A motor skill? Like riding a bicycle?
Exactly like riding a bicycle. When you learn to ride, your brain is building motor memory. At first, you consciously manage every movement. Balance, steering, pedaling. It's exhausting. You fall, you get up, you try again. But eventually, with enough repetitions, those movements become automatic. You stop thinking about them.
And speaking English is the same process?
The same neurological process. Fluent speakers aren't accessing a higher level of intelligence. They've simply practiced the motor patterns of their language so many times that production has become automatic. They're not translating. They're not checking grammar. The words flow because the brain has built deeply automatic pathways.
So when a native speaker sounds confident and fluent, that's not because they're smarter than me. It's because they've had 30 years of daily practice?
30 years of daily, effortless repetition. Millions of repetitions. Not because of intelligence, but because repetition builds automaticity. And automaticity reduces cognitive load. And when cognitive load is lower, the affective filter doesn't activate as strongly. It's a cycle that feeds itself.
This genuinely changes how I think about myself when I struggle. I was treating every stumble as proof that I wasn't capable, but it's just evidence that I need more repetition.
Beautifully put. And here's the encouraging part. You are adding repetitions right now. Every conversation you have in English, even imperfect ones, even awkward ones, is building those pathways. Your brain is literally rewiring itself each time you open your mouth.
So that painful dinner party moment was actually useful?
It was a neurological workout. You were uncomfortable, yes, but your brain was working. Discomfort in language learning is not failure. Discomfort is the feeling of growth.
I tried, but immediately I was searching. What is the right word for what I actually do? And then nothing. Total blank. And I know this topic. I could talk about architecture for an hour in my own language.
Think about it this way. A pianist doesn't stop practicing because they hit a wrong note. A footballer doesn't quit training because they missed a shot. But language learners often decide that one imperfect sentence means they should stop trying or stay silent altogether. And silence is the enemy of fluency.
Silent and safe, or imperfect and improving?
Exactly. Now, pressure test number 2. This one is harder.
Same rules, 10 seconds, answer out loud. But this time the question is abstract. It requires forming an opinion in real time. Here we go. Do you think social media makes people more connected or more lonely? Why? Stop. How was that different from the first test?
And this is important to understand. Abstract questions are significantly more demanding for non-native speakers. When you answer something about your daily life, you're activating vocabulary you've used many times before. It's well-worn territory. But abstract topics, society, emotions, ethics, require vocabulary that may be far less automatic.
And I'm also forming my opinion in the first place while simultaneously trying to express it. 2 demanding processes at once.
Each one is difficult on its own. Together, they can feel overwhelming. So, what do we actually do about this? Because practice more is true, but it doesn't help you in the moment when you're already at the dinner party and already freezing.
Exactly. I need something I can use right now.
This is where we talk about what I call the safety net, a set of tools you can use in any conversation to survive the brain panic in real time. We call them stalling phrases. These are short, natural-sounding phrases you say while your brain is still loading the actual answer. They buy you time. And crucially, they sound completely normal to native speakers who use them constantly.
So I can use these in a real conversation without sounding strange?
Not only will you not sound strange, you'll sound more thoughtful and confident. Because the alternative, silence or half-finished sentences, is what makes people uncomfortable. A well-placed stalling phrase signals, I'm engaged, I'm thinking, and I have something worth saying.
Okay, give me the phrases.
Here are 10, with examples. Mike, I'll say each one and you respond naturally, as if we're in a real conversation. Phrase 1. That's a tough one. Use this when a question is difficult or unexpected. It immediately buys you 2 or 3 seconds. And it's honest.
And it doesn't feel like cheating because the question genuinely is tough.
Exactly. Phrase 2. Let me think about that for a second. Very common in relaxed, natural conversation. It signals engagement and patience. Phrase 3. That's actually a really interesting question. Works especially well for complex or abstract topics. It also makes the other person feel good, which relaxes the atmosphere. 2 benefits at once. Phrase 4. How do I put this? Perfect for when you know the idea, but are searching for the right words. It signals intent without committing to a direction yet. Phrase 5. Let me rephrase that. Powerful because it gives you permission to start again. When your first attempt comes out wrong, and it sometimes will, this phrase lets you reset gracefully, without apologizing or stopping.
So instead of saying, sorry, my English, I just say, let me rephrase that and keep going?
And it sounds professional, not apologetic. Phrase 6. In other words, use this when you want to simplify something you just said, or when you realize mid-sentence you've gone in the wrong direction. It's a natural redirect. Phrase 7. What I'm trying to say is your recovery phrase. When you lose the thread completely, when the sentence falls apart, this brings you back on track. It also signals to your listener that something clear is coming.
This one I need to memorize immediately.
Phrase 8. From my perspective, a strong opener for any opinion question. You start speaking while your brain is still forming the rest of the answer. The phrase does the work of beginning the sentence for you.
So I start talking and trust that the answer will follow?
And it will. Phrase 9. I've never thought about it quite like that. This one buys time and shows genuine engagement. It signals to the other person that you find their question interesting, which makes them more patient and more connected. And in many cases, it's simply true. And phrase 10. Bear with me. I want to get this right. This is for the moments when you genuinely need 5 to 10 full seconds. It's honest, and it signals care rather than incompetence. People respect it far more than a rushed, muddled answer.
Confidence isn't speaking fast. Confidence is being comfortable with your own pace.
Exactly. Now, let's see them in action. Mike, I'm going to ask you a question. Use any of these naturally. Don't rush toward the answer.
All right, I'm ready.